So there Maya Chen stood, all 5 feet 4 inches of unimpressive human flesh, in the middle of the most prestigious military recruitment station this side of the Andromeda Galaxy. And let me tell you, the welcome committee was about as warm as a cryon ice bath. The Galactic Defense Corps Recruitment Center buzzed with activity, if you could call the various clicks, hisses, and subsonic rumbles that passed for conversation among the assembled alien species buzzing. Maya clutched her acceptance letter, trying not to look as out of place as she felt among beings that could bench press a small moon. Commander Vex Kalar, a towering Zephyrian with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that glowed an unsettling shade of amber, surveyed the new recruits with the enthusiasm of someone examining week-old space rations. His gaze lingered on Maya for exactly 2 seconds before moving on, apparently deciding she wasn't worth the extra attention. "Another human," muttered Sub-Commander Thrixnal, a insectoid creature whose mandibles clicked with amusement. "What's next? Recruiting house pets." The nearby Thorak warrior caste recruits rumbled with laughter, their massive frames shaking like geological events. Maya counted 6 of them, each standing at least 8 feet tall with hide thick enough to stop plasma rounds. One of them, Thorak Prime, looked down at her with 4 yellow eyes. "Soft pink thing, very small," he observed in broken galactic standard. "Will break easy, yes?" Maya smiled politely. "Oh, if only you knew," she thought. The crystalline hive-mind recruits chimed in harmony, their translucent bodies shifting color to indicate their shared amusement. Query: how did this specimen pass preliminary screening? Assessment: physical parameters inadequate for military service. Now. Commander Vex Kalar's voice cut through the mockery with the authority of someone who'd seen too many recruitment cycles. "Every species brings unique capabilities to the Corps. Even humans have their uses." The pause before uses was so loaded with condescension, Maya could have charged admission to witness it. A Venusian gas being floated nearby, its form shifting between purple and green. Perhaps waste disposal. Humans excel at consuming organic matter. More laughter rippled through the assembled recruits. Maya maintained her pleasant expression, though her grip on the acceptance letter tightened slightly. She'd heard it all before during the preliminary interviews. Humans were weak, slow, fragile, lacking any obvious predatory adaptations. They had no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no psychic abilities. What they didn't know, what none of them suspected, was exactly why Maya Chen had been specifically recruited by the GDC's most classified division. "Attention, recruits," Vex Kalar announced, his voice carrying the weight of impending doom that all drill instructors seemed to master. "You will now proceed to barracks assignment. Training begins at 0600 Standard Time. Try not to die on the first day. The paperwork is excessive." As the crowd began to disperse, Maya caught fragments of conversation from her fellow recruits. Most of it centered around speculation about how quickly the human would wash out. 10 credits says she doesn't last a week, wagered a Altarian whose metallic skin gleamed under the station's harsh lighting. "Too generous. 3 days maximum," countered another. Maya shouldered her modest duffel bag and followed the group toward the barracks, her expression remaining perfectly calm. Let them laugh. Let them place their bets. Soon enough, they'd learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. Dawn broke over Training Complex Alpha 7 like a cosmic joke, and Maya Chen was the punchline. The morning physical assessment had all the charm of a public execution, and guess who was playing the starring role of victim? The obstacle course stretched before them like a metallic nightmare designed by someone with serious anger management issues. Thorak Prime bounded over barriers that would make Olympic hurdlers weep, his massive frame moving with surprising grace. The crystalline hive minds flowed through tight spaces like liquid intelligence, reforming on the other side without missing a beat. And Maya? Well, Maya face-planted into the first mud pit with all the athletic prowess of a 3-legged giraffe having an identity crisis. "Pathetic," Instructor Grimvolt announced, his Nexarian vocal cords producing sounds that could strip paint. "The human requires assistance to traverse basic terrain obstacles." The assembled recruits watched with barely concealed amusement as Maya struggled through the rope climb. Her hands were too small, her grip strength laughable compared to beings who could crush diamond with their fingertips. She made it halfway before sliding down like butter on hot metal. Thorak Prime completed the same climb in 4 seconds flat. "Perhaps kitchen duty would suit the human better," suggested Zix Nala, the lead consciousness of the crystalline collective. Food preparation requires minimal physical capability. Maya dusted herself off, nodding agreeably. That's very thoughtful of you, she said, as if they'd offered her a promotion instead of an insult. The strength trials were even more entertaining. If you enjoyed watching someone attempt to bench press what amounted to a paperweight while surrounded by beings casually lifting the equivalent of small spacecraft. Maya's personal best barely registered on equipment calibrated for actual warriors. During combat simulations, she moved like someone learning to walk in low gravity while wearing mittens. The Altarian recruit's metallic skin deflected training rounds that would have put Maya in the medical bay for a week. She spent most sessions on the defensive, which is a polite way of saying she got her rear end handed to her repeatedly. The soft pink creature lacks predatory instincts, observed Vex Talar, a serpentine Dracorian, whose scales shifted color with emotion. Currently, they displayed the deep blue of profound disappointment. But here's where things got interesting, in a way that nobody seemed to notice except Maya herself. While everyone else focused on dominating the training exercises, she was doing something entirely different. She was watching, learning, cataloging behavioral patterns with the dedication of a scholar studying ancient texts. She noticed how Thorak warriors became aggressive when cornered but responded to confident, calm voices. She observed that crystalline hive minds coordinated through subtle color shifts that preceded their movements by exactly 2.3 seconds. She cataloged which species had pack mentalities, which were solitary hunters, and which ones were all bluster and no bite. During meal periods, while others boasted about their scores, Maya quietly listened to their stories. Tales of homeworlds, hunting traditions, territorial disputes, information that painted detailed pictures of their species' evolutionary backgrounds. Final evaluation approaches, whispered Crix-9, a cybernetic being whose optical sensors glowed red with anticipation. Rumors suggest unprecedented challenge this cycle. What kind of challenge? Maya asked innocently. The table fell silent. Meaningful glances were exchanged, the kind that suggested everyone knew something she didn't. Nothing the human need concern herself with. Thorak Prime rumbled dismissively. Evaluation requires capabilities beyond soft flesh limitations. Maya nodded thoughtfully, filing away yet another piece of the puzzle. 3 weeks into training, her performance statistics read like a comedy routine. Dead last in physical trials, bottom percentile in combat effectiveness, and her tactical assessment scores were so low they practically required archaeological excavation to find. What nobody bothered recording was her perfect score in something they didn't even know they were testing, understanding the predatory nature of every single being around her. But hey, who keeps track of useless talents like that? Week 4 arrived with all the fanfare of a funeral march, and Maya Chen had achieved something truly spectacular. She had redefined the meaning of military incompetence. Her performance scores weren't just bad, they were artistically terrible, like someone had taken failure and turned it into performance art. The strength assessment results were particularly impressive, if you appreciated statistical anomalies. While Thorak Prime could deadlift 2,400 kilograms, Maya maxed out at a whopping 75. That's not a typo, folks. 75 kilograms. The crystalline recruits could exert more force with their thinking appendages than Maya could generate with her entire body. Perhaps suggested Instructor Grimvolt during one particularly painful evaluation session. The human should consider alternative career paths. Waste management shows promising growth potential. The speed trials were equally enlightening. Maya's best sprint time clocked in at what most species considered a leisurely stroll. Vex Talar the Dracorian moved faster sideways than Maya could manage in a straight line. Even the gas-form Venusians, who technically didn't have legs, could traverse distances more efficiently. Combat simulations became a source of entertainment for the other recruits. They'd gather to watch Maya attempt basic defensive maneuvers with all the coordination of a broken protocol droid. Her reaction times were slow, her tactical awareness non-existent, and her ability to adapt to changing combat scenarios was roughly equivalent to a decorative plant. The soft flesh entity appears incapable of learning, observed the crystalline collective, their harmonic voices chiming with scientific fascination. Query: how did this specimen survive natural selection processes? The mockery had evolved from casual dismissal to genuine bewilderment. How could any species produce something so utterly inadequate for survival, let alone military service? Maya had become a walking contradiction to evolutionary theory. Poor little human. The narrator inside everyone's head seemed to whisper with false sympathy, clearly out of her depth in a galaxy filled with superior life forms. But during off-duty hours, Maya displayed behaviors that nobody bothered to analyze. She'd sit quietly in the common areas, observing interactions between different species with the focus of someone solving complex equations. When Thorak warriors got into territorial disputes, she'd note the specific postures that preceded either submission or escalation. She watched how the Dracorians' scale patterns shifted during stress, how the Altarians' metallic skin dimmed when they felt threatened, how the crystalline collective's harmonics changed frequency based on their collective emotional state. Every species had tells, behavioral patterns that revealed their underlying psychology. During one memorable incident, when recruit Vex Talar became agitated over meal distribution protocols, Maya had quietly approached and used a specific vocal tone that immediately calmed the serpentine being. Nobody questioned how she knew exactly which frequency would soothe an angry Dracorian. They simply attributed it to lucky timing. Her personal quarters told a different story, if anyone had bothered to look. Hidden among regulation gear were detailed notebooks filled with behavioral observations, species-specific response patterns, and what could only be described as comprehensive psychological profiles of every life form in the training complex. The other recruits continued placing bets on her inevitable washout. Current odds favored her lasting another week at most, with generous payouts for anyone optimistic enough to bet on 2 weeks. Maya maintained her pleasant demeanor throughout, accepting each failure with grace and each insult with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. After all, the best hunters are always underestimated by their prey. The announcement came at 0500 hours with all the warmth of an airlock malfunction. Commander Vex Kalar's voice echoed through the barracks like the sound of impending doom learning to use a public address system. Final evaluation commences at 0800. Report to Security Complex Delta 9. Failure results in immediate dismissal from the program. Maya rolled out of her bunk, noting how the other recruits' excitement levels had shifted into something resembling barely controlled panic. Weeks of whispered rumors about the mysterious final test had built expectations, and now the moment of truth was literally hours away. The march to Security Complex Delta 9 felt like a funeral procession, if funeral processions involved heavily armed beings trying to look confident while secretly questioning their life choices. The facility loomed ahead like a metallic monument to poor architectural planning, all sharp angles and intimidating blast doors. What exactly is the security system? Maya asked Thorak Prime during the walk. The massive warrior's 4 eyes shifted uncomfortably. Ancient creature, very dangerous. Many handlers have died attempting control. That was reassuring in the way that asteroid impacts are reassuring to planetary populations. Inside the complex, they were led to an observation deck overlooking what could only be described as an arena designed by someone with serious psychological issues. The space below was enormous, easily 300 meters across, with walls that showed deep gouges and scorch marks, the kind of marks that suggested previous occupants had not enjoyed their stay. Recruits, Commander Vex Kalar began, his amber eyes glowing with what might have been anticipation or indigestion. Meet your final evaluation. The massive blast doors at the arena's far end began to cycle open with the sound of tortured metal. What emerged from the darkness beyond defied easy description, mainly because most vocabularies don't include words for nightmare given physical form. Krax was magnificent in the way that natural disasters are magnificent. Standing 4 meters at the shoulder, the creature moved with predatory grace that made seasoned warriors step back involuntarily. Its hide was midnight black, shot through with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like a malevolent heartbeat. 6 legs ended in claws that could shred starship hull plating, while its elongated head housed teeth designed for ending arguments permanently. Sweet merciful void, whispered Crix 9, his optical sensors automatically dimming to cope with the sight. But it was the intelligence in those ancient eyes that made Krax truly terrifying. This wasn't some mindless beast driven by instinct. This was a thinking, calculating apex predator that had survived countless millennia by being very, very good at killing things. Krax has eliminated 17 handlers over the past decade. Vex Kalar continued conversationally, as if discussing weather patterns. The creature responds to no known command protocols and recognizes no authority. Your task is to demonstrate control over this security asset. The crystalline collective's harmonics shifted into frequencies that suggested they were reconsidering their career choices. The Thorak warriors, beings who considered armed conflict recreational activity, were backing away from the observation windows. And Maya was studying cracks with the intensity of someone reading a particularly interesting technical manual. The great beast raised its head, those ancient eyes scanning the observation deck. When its gaze fell on Maya, something passed between them. Recognition perhaps, or maybe just mutual professional respect between predators. Who volunteers to go first? Vex Kalar asked. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have held archaeological excavations in it. The silence stretched on like a bad joke that had overstayed its welcome at a diplomatic dinner. Every recruit suddenly found the floor fascinating, the ceiling architecturally noteworthy, or their equipment in desperate need of adjustment. Anything to avoid volunteering for what appeared to be elaborate suicide. Thorak Prime, who had spent weeks bragging about his warrior heritage and genetic superiority, was studying his claws with scholarly dedication. The crystalline collective had shifted to a dull gray that suggested they were contemplating the philosophical implications of non-existence. Even Vex Talar the Dracorian, whose species prided itself on fearlessness, had found urgent reasons to examine the structural integrity of the far wall. Fascinating, Commander Vex Kalar observed, his amber eyes scanning the suddenly introverted group. Weeks of boasting about superior capabilities, and now silence reigned supreme. That's when Maya Chen, the human recruit who couldn't bench press her own body weight, stepped forward. I volunteer. The collective intake of breath from the observation deck could have powered a small atmospheric processor. Every head turned to stare at the tiny human who had apparently decided that dying spectacularly was preferable to dying slowly from embarrassment. Human, Thorak Prime rumbled, creature will consume you in single bite. Very messy death, probably. Maya agreed cheerfully, already moving toward the arena access. But somebody has to go first, right? The descent to arena level felt like traveling to another dimension, one where gravity worked differently, and air tasted of imminent mortality. Maya emerged through the personnel access with all the fanfare of someone arriving late to their own execution. Cracks had been pacing near the center of the arena, but stopped when Maya appeared, those ancient eyes fixed on her with predatory focus, evaluating this new potential meal with professional interest. The creature's bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster, like a heartbeat accelerating before a hunt. From the observation deck, she could hear whispered commentary that sounded suspiciously like betting activity. Apparently, the over-under on her survival time was measured in seconds rather than minutes. Maya walked calmly toward the center of the arena, her pace steady and unhurried. No sudden movements, no signs of fear or aggression, just a small human approaching a creature that could end her existence with casual indifference. Cracks lowered its massive head, studying this bizarre behavior. In its experience, prey animals either fled screaming or attacked desperately. This one was doing neither, which was frankly confusing from a predatory perspective. When Maya reached speaking distance, she stopped and did something that made every observer question their understanding of basic survival instincts. She turned her back on Cracks, not partially, not keeping one eye on the beast while pretending indifference. She completely turned away from a creature that had killed 17 trained handlers, presenting her most vulnerable position with casual confidence. Cracks's head tilted, confusion evident in those intelligent eyes. This behavior pattern wasn't in the predatory response manual. Easy boy, Maya said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the arena's acoustic design. Nobody's here to hurt you. The words weren't directed at the observation deck. They weren't meant to impress anyone or demonstrate bravery. They were spoken with the calm assurance of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Cracks's aggressive posture shifted slightly, uncertainty replacing predatory focus. Maya began moving again, not away from the beast but in a slow circle around it. Her movements were deliberate, confident, exhibiting none of the fear responses that typically triggered Cracks's aggressive instincts. You're not a monster, she continued conversationally. You're just tired of people treating you like one. Something impossible happened. Krax's bioluminescent patterns shifted from aggressive red to curious blue, following Maya's movement with what could only be described as interest rather than hunger. The observation deck had gone completely silent except for the sound of jaws hitting the floor, which is quite impressive when some of those jaws belong to species without traditional mandible structures. Maya reached into her utility belt and produced something that made every observer lean forward. A simple protein bar, standard military ration. She broke off a piece and held it out in her open palm. "Here's the thing about apex predators," she said, still using that calm conversational tone. "They don't want to fight. They want to hunt, to feed, to exist without constant challenges to their authority." Krax approached cautiously, massive head lowering to investigate the offered food. The great beast's nostrils flared, analyzing scents and intentions with senses far beyond human capability. "You've been treated like a weapon for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to be treated like a living being." The moment when Krax delicately accepted the food from Maya's hand was the moment when every recruit's understanding of reality underwent fundamental restructuring. The creature that had killed 17 handlers was eating protein bars from the palm of the human who couldn't complete a basic obstacle course. Maya's other hand slowly reached up to touch the side of Krax's massive head. The beast didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, those ancient eyes closed in what appeared to be contentment. "Good boy," Maya whispered. From the observation deck came the distinct sound of Thorak Prime's worldview cracking like defective armor plating. Maya looked up at the stunned faces watching from above and smiled, that same pleasant expression she'd worn during weeks of mockery and dismissal. "So," she called out, her voice carrying clearly to the observation deck, "who wants to know how I did that?" The elevator ride back to the observation deck gave everyone time to process what they'd just witnessed, which is to say it gave them time to question everything they thought they knew about reality, Maya Chen, and the fundamental nature of predatory relationships in the universe. Maya emerged from the elevator with Krax padding beside her like the galaxy's most terrifying therapy animal. The sight of the legendary beast killer casually following a human who barely reached its shoulder was causing several species to recalibrate their entire understanding of the food chain. "Explanation requested immediately," chimed the crystalline collective, their harmonics shifting through frequencies that suggested deep philosophical distress. "Happy to oblige," Maya replied, scratching behind one of Krax's auditory appendages. The gesture caused the massive predator to emit a sound that could only be described as purring, if purring could shake reinforced observation windows. Commander Vex Kalar stepped forward, his amber eyes displaying emotions that his species typically reserved for witnessing impossible physics violations. "Maya Chen, your performance records indicate complete incompetence in all standard military applications. How do you explain what just occurred?" Maya's smile shifted from pleasant to genuinely amused. "Simple. You were testing for the wrong skills." She gestured toward Krax, who had settled beside her like a mountain deciding to take a nap. Everyone assumed this was about dominance, about proving superior strength or tactical superiority. But Krax isn't a weapon that needed conquering. He's an intelligent being who needed understanding. Thorak Prime's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of profound confusion among his species. "But creature killed many handlers. Very dangerous. Much death. Because they treated him like a monster instead of recognizing what he actually is." Maya explained patiently. "Krax is apex predator, yes, but he's also highly intelligent and emotionally complex. Every handler who died tried to dominate him through force or fear. That's not how you work with apex predators." She turned to address Vex Kalar directly. "My background isn't in traditional military applications, Commander. Before joining the GDC, I spent 12 years as an animal behaviorist and large predator specialist on Earth. I've worked with everything from Siberian tigers to great white sharks." The revelation hit the assembled recruits like a kinetic bombardment. Suddenly Maya's weeks of careful observation, her detailed questions about homeworlds and behavioral patterns, her mysterious calmness in situations that terrified seasoned warriors, all of it made perfect sense. "Earth assignment records were classified," Vex Kalar admitted, his tone carrying newfound respect. The recruitment division identified you specifically for this program based on psychological evaluations and specialized skill assessments. Maya nodded. The Galactic Defense Corps hasn't been struggling with military threats, have they? You've been dealing with something else entirely. Affirmative, the commander confirmed. Expansion into previously unexplored sectors has encountered significant obstacles. Not hostile alien civilizations but entire planetary ecosystems that resist colonization efforts. Worlds where the local fauna cannot be controlled through conventional means. The pieces clicked together in everyone's mind simultaneously. Maya wasn't recruited to be a soldier. She was recruited to be something far more valuable and infinitely more dangerous. Wild planets, Maya said quietly. Worlds where apex predators have evolved beyond simple animal intelligence but haven't developed technological civilization. Planets where the entire ecosystem functions as a unified defensive system. 17 worlds have been classified as unsuitable for development. Vex Kalar continued. Colonies have been established and subsequently abandoned due to indigenous life form resistance. Traditional military responses have proven ineffective. Crix 9's optical sensors focused with mechanical precision. Query, human capability extends beyond single creature control. Maya's grin was answer enough, but she provided verbal confirmation anyway. Ecosystem management is about understanding the behavioral dynamics of entire food webs. When you can communicate with apex predators, you can influence the behavioral patterns of everything below them in the hierarchy. The implication settled over the observation deck like a revelation-shaped gravitational field. Maya Chen wasn't just capable of controlling individual dangerous creatures. She could potentially pacify entire hostile planets by establishing relationships with their dominant life forms. The other recruits, Thorak Prime said slowly, were never real candidates. You were all selected for different specializations, Maya confirmed. But yes, this particular program was designed around one very specific human capability that apparently doesn't exist in other species. She looked around at the faces staring at her with newfound understanding and in several cases carefully concealed fear. Humans aren't the strongest, fastest or most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, Maya said calmly. But we're very, very good at making friends with things that could kill us. 3 months later, Maya Chen stood on the bridge of the GDC exploration vessel Harmony's Edge, wearing the insignia of a specialized environmental coordinator, which was a fancy way of saying person who makes friends with things that eat spaceships. The promotion ceremony had been awkward, mainly because half the attendees were still processing the fact that they'd spent weeks mocking someone who was essentially irreplaceable. Cracks occupied a specially designed habitat adjacent to the bridge, because apparently having a 4-meter apex predator as a working partner required certain accommodations. The engineering department had complained about the modifications until they realized that Crax's presence made boarding actions by hostile forces essentially impossible. Hard to maintain aggressive intentions when something with teeth the size of plasma rifles is evaluating your nutritional content. The crew treated Maya with the kind of respectful distance typically reserved for ordnance that might explode if handled incorrectly, which, considering her ability to turn planetary ecosystems into either allies or enemies, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Approaching Kepler 442b, announced the navigation officer, a Zephyrian, whose amber eyes still widened whenever Maya entered the bridge. Previous colony attempts reported total loss of personnel within 6 standard months. Maya reviewed the planetary data with professional interest. Dense forests, multiple apex predator species, and an ecosystem so aggressively territorial that it had literally ejected 3 separate colonization attempts. The kind of world that made military planners drink heavily and consider career changes. Preliminary scans indicate massive life signs throughout all continental landmasses, the science officer reported. Energy signatures suggest creatures of substantial size and intelligence. Through the bridge viewports, Kepler 442b hung in space like a green and brown jewel, beautiful and absolutely lethal to anyone foolish enough to approach without proper diplomatic credentials. Which in this case meant Maya and her growing collection of predatory friends. Standard protocol. asked Captain Vex Morin, whose own species had contributed 3 of the recruits who'd watched Maya's demonstration with cracks. Standard protocol. Maya confirmed, already mentally preparing her approach strategies. We go down, introduce ourselves politely, and see who's interested in having a conversation. The other bridge crew exchanged glances that suggested they still found the concept of introducing themselves to creatures capable of dismantling starships somewhat surreal. But results spoke louder than conventional wisdom, and Maya's track record was becoming legendary within certain circles of the GDC. Her first 3 planetary assignments had gone from hostile wilderness to functioning eco-partnerships within weeks. Worlds that had been written off as unsuitable for development were now hosting research stations and limited settlements, all because someone had bothered to ask the local apex predators for permission before moving in. Chen, Captain Vex Morin said quietly, the recruitment division has been receiving inquiries from other human candidates. Apparently word has spread about our success rates. Maya nodded thoughtfully. How many applications? 2,736 at last count. The number was staggering, mainly because it represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed human capabilities. 3 months ago humans were considered useful for basic labor and entertainment purposes. Now they were being actively recruited for positions that could determine the success or failure of galactic expansion efforts. Funny how perspective changes, Maya observed, watching Kepler 442b grow larger in the viewports. 6 months ago everyone was placing bets on how quickly I'd wash out of basic training. Krax raised his massive head from where he'd been resting, those ancient eyes focusing on the planet ahead with predatory interest. His bioluminescent patterns shifted to colors that Maya had learned to interpret as curiosity mixed with anticipation. Well boy, she said, scratching behind his auditory appendages, ready to make some new friends. The great beast's responding purr resonated through the ship's hull, a sound that would have terrified most lifeforms but that Maya found oddly comforting. After all, there's something reassuring about having the galaxy's most efficient killing machine as your co-worker and friend. Approaching orbital insertion point, the navigation officer announced. Maya stood, adjusting her equipment harness and checking her collection of interspecies communication tools. Another day, another planet full of apex predators who just needed someone to treat them with respect instead of fear. Beginning descent to surface, she confirmed, heading toward the shuttle bay with Krax padding beside her like a mountain-sized therapy animal. Behind her, the bridge crew watched with the kind of reverence typically reserved for witnessing impossible things become routine. Because that's what Maya Chen had accomplished. She'd made the impossible look easy, one apex predator at a time. And somewhere in the back of everyone's mind was the same thought, maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous predator in the galaxy wasn't the one with the biggest teeth. Maybe it was the one who could convince all the others to be friends.